Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're really excited to do our presentation today, and it's great to see such a packed room. We have a terrific group of presenters. I'm going to do some really quick introductions and then run through the agenda. I wanted just a couple of quick things. This session is being recorded. If you want to add any comments or questions, do it in the Pathable app if you're online rather than in the Zoom. And that way we'll have a record of them, so it's a better way to go. So I'm going to run through our 11 speakers real quick. We don't have a lot of time, and we could probably have a book about each of these amazing people who have accomplished so much in their careers. So I guess I'll start with myself. I'm a senior principal at Limnotech. We're a water resources and environmental engineering firm, and I lead our corporate water stewardship practice area. And I've been working in this water field for 35 years, which sounds like a really long time, and was very much involved in the volumetric water benefit accounting work and some related initiatives recently. Katrin Gronemeyer is a program manager for the BMU Water Dialogues program at GIZ, and she has more than 10 years of experience in the political arena working across many of their programs. Michael Matisic is a corporate strategy associate focusing on global water security for the Nature Conservancy, and he's based in California. He engages with TNC's corporate partners around source water protection in key geographies. He advises companies on their water sustainability strategy and helps refine TNC's corporate strategy. Greg Burl is online. He's a senior researcher with the Pacific Institute and technical lead for the United Nations Global Compact CEO Water Mandate. And he leads the work on developing and scaling awareness and investment in nature-based solutions. His technical support stretches across water resilience, net positive water impact, and science-based target setting. Cora Kameyer is a senior researcher at the Pacific Institute, where she works on corporate water stewardship, integrated water management, California water policy, and more. In particular, she supports the UN Global Compact CEO Water Mandate and the California Water Action Collaborative. Ivan Paspaljevic, Ivan, is a senior consultant at Denkstadt, where he leads their services for natural and social capital management and biodiversity, and helps companies understand and manage their impacts and dependencies on nature, the economy, and society toward creating shared value. And Madhu Rajesh is a senior director for water and agriculture at Coca-Cola. In this role, she helps drive progress against the company's environmental, social, and governance goals, focusing on the 2030 water security strategy and sustainable agriculture sourcing globally. Ed Pinero is also online, and he is the president of Ecometrics LLC, a methodology to quantify and monetize co-benefits resulting from nature-based solutions and ecosystem services projects. And over his more than 40-year career, Mr. Pinero has worked in the private and public sectors, including serving as Senior Vice President for Sustainability for Veolia North America. Ben Walensky is the Director of Partnerships and Innovation at the Arbor Day Foundation. He is charged with collaborating with the world's preeminent brands to co-develop environmental sustainability and corporate social responsibility efforts aligned to its mission of inspiring people to plant, nurture, and celebrate trees. Nikki Franciskaki is a chair professor in regional and metropolitan governance and planning in the section of spatial planning in the geosciences faculty, Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Her experience is in urban transitions and their governance and planning. And Andrea Erickson-Quiras, I think this is Andrea, you might be the, the 12th and last, currently serves as Global Director for Water Security, and conveniently, at the Nature Conservancy. She leads TNC's team working to identify, test, and deploy innovative, large-scale strategies that demonstrate how investments in nature will enable us to secure the water as we need to prosper. So those were really way too short to describe these amazing people who are our presenters today. And we will move on to the agenda now. We have a packed agenda. We're going to Katrin is going to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll be doing a Mentimeter poll. The information for that, I guess Michael will share how to get to that. Yeah. And then we'll be hearing some presentations on the forecasting methodology and interactive forecast demonstration, talking about the valuation methodology, and then we're planning a fireside chat between some of the speakers that I just introduced, and then a Mentimeter poll at the end. And Mentimeter you can pull up on your phone, and I think Michael will explain that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, I think. No, Katrin, yeah. And I'll give you this.
Thank you very much. And to make confusion of the presentators more confusing, I'm actually not here for the BMU today, but stepping in for BMZ, who unfortunately couldn't be here. So the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. So I'm presenting on their behalf. First of all, welcome everybody to this session. We will dive into the technical part later, but this will be a very political introduction to the whole topic. And I think we all see that looking around the globe, this is more pressing than ever. We've been talking a lot about the last years, how water ecosystem are important, and we need to do something looking at how climate change will affect those ecosystems. And I'm coming from Bonn, so I'm about 3 minutes from the Rhine, and I can see the levels dropping over the last couple of months because there was just no rain at all. We see also a lot of raging forest fires around the globe. We see droughts in East Africa. We see floods in Pakistan, in India, and so forth. So we see that ecosystems are at the crucial level on which global challenges become a reality for all of us. And they are facing the triple planetary crisis, which you're all aware of. So changing climate with, at the moment, unimaginable outcomes, severe environmental pollution exceeding the planetary boundaries as they are, and plant and animal species facing extinction, which also have even more consequences that some we're aware of, some we're not. So looking at this future, which is bleak, and I'm sorry for doing that, it's not much use looking at past data because it doesn't give us much to work with. We have to forecast, to identify and upscale our measures to actually achieve a climate resilient and water secure future. And nature-based solutions will be a big part of that. And I think that's something that will become apparent today. Today, we will look at how they accrue across multiple spatial and temporal scales in different habitats and how they can be valued and how that can help to bring nature-based solutions forward by offering investors and practitioners a better understanding of when and where they can be applied and what to gain from it. For a long time, we have looked at those scenarios that I just basically explained, the negative ones. What I would encourage this session to do is also to look at what would be the best case scenario if we look to the future. What is the best picture you can build for a climate resilient, water secure future? And then ask ourselves with every technology, with all business cases that we apply, how does that fit to this picture? What do I need to change to actually make this picture happen and not, violate it, have negative impacts on it? We will find that actually nature-based solutions will be a big part of making this picture a reality and having it stay as a reality. NBS function as a bridge to overcome the most pressing issues of our time. We have ecological bridges to restore connectivity within and among adjacent ecosystems through corridors. We have social bridges, transboundary settings, especially between neighboring countries. We have economic bridges between the global south, global north, but also public and private sectors. The benefits we all aim to achieve with these bridges include ecosystem services, such as increased water purification and storage, nutrient retention, carbon sequestration, as well as food provision and obviously recreational value. Looking at German development cooperation, protecting ecosystems and promoting sustainable use of their services is one of the key priorities. Especially after last elections, it has been one of the priorities in German development cooperation. The BMZ is increasingly committed to promote biodiversity-friendly and social responsible restoration of ecosystems worldwide by focusing on nature-based solutions as part of an integrated resource management. For us, that also means that blue-green solutions are an alternative to the former gray infrastructure, or could be part of hybrid solutions, and they're often less cost-extensive than the traditional approaches. Nature-based solutions help to ensure true resilience, which is relevant for all communities to enhance human well-being and sustainable development. And the solutions create important synergies for achieving water-related goals and targets of other global agendas, be it the climate or the biodiversity agenda. At the moment, the water sector is Germany's largest bilateral climate adaptation sector, and Germany is investing more than 400 million euros annually. And since 2013, Germany has furthermore supported the implementation of the CBD in partner countries with more than 500 million annually. And we stay committed to have that and maybe even increase that ambition over the next years. Especially looking at now more on the water side, the important conference that will come next year in March to actually have a turning point and have the idea and the possibilities of nature-based solutions incorporated there. With that, I would leave you to the more in-depth look at nature-based solutions, the benefits and the value of it. And I would like to thank the Pacific Institute, CO Water Mandate, the Nature Conservancy and Limnotech, as we already heard, for organizing the sessions together with my colleagues from GIZ. And I wish you all great discussions and great input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Katrin. Before we kind of dive into today's content, we'd like to hear from all of you and just kind of about the challenges you're facing when investing in nature-based solutions, whether it's valuation, forecasting, things like that. So we are going to use Mentimeter. I'm sure a lot of you have already used this tool this week. So go ahead, grab your phones out. If you're online, you can just open up a new browser, or you can try and do the QR code too. That hopefully should work if you zoom in. Getting a head nod, great. So go to menti.com, and then it will ask you to type in the code, which you'll see here on the screen, 39191646. We'll pause here for a second until you get on before we get to that question. I know I was trying to get on Menti a couple days ago. It took a lot longer than I thought, so I want to make sure everyone gets in. All right, so the first question is, like I just said, kind of what challenges are you facing when investing in nature-based solutions? Keep in mind that this will turn to a word cloud, so if you can kind of keep them in brief, simple, short phrases, that would be great. And then to our panelists who will be participating later in the fireside chat, when we get those results up, kind of keep these in mind, because we hope to kind of address some of these challenges people are facing in our conversations. And then to those of you responding, also keep them in mind, so I'll follow up with you at the end of today's session with another question about what you learned about these challenges today. So lots of different ideas, which is great. Valuation, financing, evidence, policy, buy-in, difficult to measure benefits, insufficient data, return on investment. So many different ones. Regionalization, how to prioritize. So as you can see, quite a few different challenges with nature-based solutions. So we hope today's session will help you kind of figure out how you can address some of these challenges, what tools are out there to help you get to the bottom of these challenges. And we'll go from there. I will pass it over to Cora.
Standing over here, so I'm not blocking the slides. Hopefully that works. Hi, everyone. My name is Cora. I'm with the Pacific Institute and CEO Water Mandate and have been a part of this nature-based solutions team. And I wanted to start by giving a bit of a project overview to lay the foundation for the fireside chat. So we have positioned ourselves in this project at the start of the NBS journey, really aiming to provide those who are interested in investing in nature-based solutions with a means to identify and understand, what kinds of benefits can nature-based solutions provide. And in doing so, we can, build the business case for NBS and provide this standardized approach to understanding the benefits of NBS that can then support existing efforts around corporate water stewardship, resilience planning, carbon mitigation, and other efforts. So as you can see on the slide, this project has 2 stages. The first stage, which is focused on benefit identification and accounting, was completed last year, and that resulted in a comprehensive guide and an interactive benefit explorer tool, and you can find those at ceowatermandate.org/NBS and the interactive tool at nbsbenefitsexplorer.net. So now we're on to phase 2, which is around benefit forecasting and valuation. So in forecasting, we're aiming to predict how the benefits of different NBS activities can accrue over space and time. And then in valuation, we're looking to provide estimates of both economic value and social returns on NBS. And as we're going through stage 2, we're also continuing to bolster our methods that we identified and developed in stage 1 to ensure that we're really providing the most robust and up-to-date quantification methods for NBS. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go over some of the objectives of this work, specifically around the stage 2 with forecasting and valuation components. And there's 3 key objectives. So first is, one of the key purposes of this work is really to provide a clearer roadmap for benefit accrual and valuation. So the guide and tool that we developed in stage 1 was focused on identifying benefits, linking specific habitats, interventions, and activities to those benefits and any associated trade-offs. So the new forecasting method is improving and clarifying this work by adding the dimensions of how those benefits then accrue over space and time. So this is really taking us from this space of kind of, the what to the how. And then the valuation component complements this by really providing the different kind of social, economic, and environmental values of those NBS investments. The second objective is around improving and complementing existing and past efforts. We know that other organizations have initiated similar efforts around benefit forecasting and valuation, and we want to expand on that and add to the growing body of work in this space. And then third is around supporting the business case for NBS investments. Having these estimates and predictions around the scope, scale, and timing of benefits can help reduce uncertainty and increase understanding of NBS, which can then help build the business case and support the ROI for such investments. And we also are really aiming to help clarify for those interested in investing in these kinds of projects, how much planning and resources really need to go into them and then what you're going to get out of it. And we also are hoping that these forecast and valuation estimates can help practitioners visualize how benefits accrue over space and time, which we're going to get into later in this session. Thank you. We want to, can you go to the next slide, please? As I mentioned, one of our goals here is to complement and build on existing efforts. We know that there are other initiatives that have started to consider these benefit projections across different habitat and intervention types. And we have 2 examples here on the slide, the work of Forest Trends and the work of Science for Nature and People Partnership. And we're really hoping to support these efforts by providing these general projections and predictions through our forecasting and valuation efforts. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to get a little bit more into the background on the methods that were developed in stage 1 that are really laying the foundation for our stage 2 work now. So determining a clear set of habitat and intervention types was really the initial foundation. And what we did here was establishing 9 habitat types and 4 intervention types that were based on the University of Oxford's Nature-Based Solutions Evidence Platform and the IUCN Habitats Classification Scheme. So you can see on the slide here, the 4 intervention types are restoration, management, conservation, and creation. And we know that these are not mutually exclusive, right? These are often implemented in concert with one another. And then I won't read all 9 habitat types, but similarly, you often see multiple habitat types, coexisting in one location. And then in phase 2, we're adding this dimension of scale that you can see in the bottom right. Thinking about how benefits accrue over space and time, looking at different time scales, and then the property, municipal, and watershed spatial scales. Next slide. So then going a little deeper on how this framework is set up, the 4 interventions that I mentioned are then actually broken down into 21 separate activities that fall within those interventions to help us get more specific, like removing alien vegetation or doing wetland restoration, getting more specific here on what kinds of activities you're implementing. And then there are, the actual benefits that are accruing from these activities. And we standardize these as well with a set of 27 benefits that fall under the 5 overarching themes here: water quality, quantity, carbon, biodiversity, and socioeconomic benefits. So then in phase 2, we are considering how the benefits of these various activities across these habitats accrue over space and time, which allow us to generate forecasts of potential benefits of NBS projects. And we're going to get a little bit more on that current work from my colleague, Greg, who's going to join us virtually.
Great. Thank you so much, Cora. Thank you, everybody, for joining the session. And as Cora's mentioned, we're really going to get into the weeds now of how our methodology works in practice. So what you'll see on screen is a series of scores that we've developed through the academic literature and with expert advice. You'll see a selection across trade-offs, which is the negative components of the work, as well as right up to a high percentage. What we've based these scores on is the percentage of potential benefit that can be achieved by taking certain actions and those benefits that accrue. So as mentioned, scores are allocated for both the potential benefits and for trade-offs. And we have based these very much on the expert review as well as academic literature where this is possible. What we've done is made sure that these are very standardized approaches here, because we realize that not all habitat types are the same. So whether you're looking at a habitat like a forest in Colombia versus that in Sweden, they're not all created equal effectively. Next slide, please. So what we did for each of the scoring rubrics that we developed was we developed a scenario so that we're all on the same baseline here, so that we understand what we mean by a forest and the kinds of conditions that exist within it. So we have 5 key characteristics within each scenario. The first is the type of habitat. So by example here, we gave for to our reviewers a temperate forest in North America. We gave a size of forest. We gave the hydrology of that forest, the state of the landscape, as well as the position within the watershed. We've done this across each of the intervention categories, so restoration, protection, creation, and the 4th one. And then we have provided these for the various activities and benefits as well. So quite comprehensive in the scenario details, just again to make sure that everyone is scoring effectively and on the same page. Next slide, please. So don't get overwhelmed by this slide at all. All it's showing you is what the back end looks like for our methodological scoring. What we've done in the first column is you will see an activity category. So each of the activities that are relevant to a specific habitat intervention category, we've given an activities list so that, again, those that are scoring or reviewing our scores understand what we mean within a specific activity category. You will then see within the columns themselves, just an example of one benefit. So for example, within forest restoration that you'll see on screen here, anything that's grayed out is not a direct linkage within that specific habitat intervention category. And those that are white with a score over there, you can see how we've applied those scores within each of these. Importantly, and if you can click once, we link activity to benefit. And again, as Cora's mentioned, there are 21 activities with 27 benefits. So quite a lot of interlinkages here as well. We've done this across 3 spatial scales: property, municipal, and watershed, as well as 3 temporal scales. So the first 4 years of a project, the next 5 to 9 years of a project, and then 10 years plus. So what we do is we hopefully see an incremental increase and that S curve that increases over time. So you'll start at generally a low base, specifically within restoration, and then you want to try and achieve this much higher benefit thresholds towards the 5 to 9 year and the 10-year plus. Also, if you can just click through a couple of times, because ultimately what we're wanting to see here, or what we do see here, is around 1,500 entries per habitat intervention category. So this is a very data-intensive process. And as Cora's mentioned up front, is that we also have 4 interventions. So if you multiply this by 4 per habitat category, we're looking at around 6,000 data points per habitat category. So a lot of work goes into this. We try and verify this with the academic literature, but we also have a number of experts that review this throughout the process as well. We're also hoping to make this open source through an expert interface in our tool, the NBS Benefits Explorer tool, so that if there is any opportunity to keep our finger on the pulse of best available science, that we can maneuver these points pretty dynamically based on this expert input down the line. Next slide, please. So at this point, we said, we thought, let's show you what the outputs would look like. So you've seen what the back end looks like. We obviously don't want to overwhelm people too much by showing that on the tool side. So let's show what the actual outputs through a graphical representation would look like. And we've selected forest restorations, but again, we'd like a little bit of audience participation here. So if you can please select out of the 5 options that are on screen, what you would like to see from a back-end perspective, so from the front-end perspective, rather, the graphical representations. So the 5 options that you see on the left-hand side of your slide, if you could please go to menti.com and use the code 98129153, you can then select which of those options you would like to see the graphs for across the 3 spatial scales and the 3 temporal scales. Right, it looks like we've got a clear winner there. So Ilse, if you wouldn't mind going to that particular slide, I will talk through what the graph would look like. There we go. All right, so this is an example of a proposed output that you will see once you've clicked through the Benefits Explorer tool. Once you've done the identification, we will then offer an opportunity to forecast what those benefits would look like. You can see the 3 spatial scales are represented there. The first, the property scale, the municipal scale, and then the watershed scale as well. Within that, you will see 3 time periods on each of the graphs. Again, 1 to 4 years, 5 to 9 years, and 10 years plus. You'll also see a dark median line. This is where the majority of data points are centered based, again, on the literature or an academic review. And for example, groundwater recharge as an activity, the benefit is increased groundwater storage and therefore volumetric benefits within the groundwater realm as well. So generally, if you had to start your groundwater recharge program, within the first couple of years, you'll start seeing already a very high level of benefit accrual within that within this activity benefit linkage. Over time, that only increases as you start developing greater technology and greater efficacy within your groundwater recharge strategies. That increases over time. You'll also see on each of the graphs there is a maximum benefit accrual benchmark over there as well. And that's ultimately what we're trying to aim for, is to reach that high point of not necessarily 100% benefit accrual, because that's not always possible, but somewhere within that higher realm, which is around 85 to 100% of where that benefit could accrue. You'll also see a lighter gradient line there as well. And as I mentioned up front, not all habitats are the same. So within different habitat types, you might have slightly more or slightly less of that benefit accrual potential. So what we do is we provide some variability within this that increases at least some level of certainty within the first 4 years of where your benefit accrual might land. So it might be slightly towards the lower side, that low to medium gradient, or it might be even higher than that medium to high, depending on the nature of the hydrology and various other variables that come with groundwater recharge. As you'll see as well, that gradient, that light blue gradient, decreases over time. That means we are increasing our level of certainty within the median as well. So as you get to that 10-year period, we're fairly confident that you'll be within the high benefit accrual percentage range as well. Importantly to note here is that over time, over the spatial scale, we have potentially less certainty within the municipal and watershed scale, specifically within groundwater recharge. I think many of us in the audience today know that groundwater is not an exact science. It takes a long time to understand the flows and the dynamics around that as well. So a little less of certainty over the largest temporal scales as well. But you can also see that there's less percentage or potential percentage benefit accrual over those greater scales as well. And I'll speak to some of the caveats that come with this exact methodology. So I think at that point, let's go on to the caveats. Thanks, Answer. So 5 key points to raise here. And the first is within this localization of benefit accrual. What we're seeing is that by investing in a particular project within a landscape, that the majority of benefits accrue at that localized project scale. And this is almost across the board, regardless of that benefit activity linkage that we're finding. The magnitude of benefits is also potentially greatest at the localized project scale. And this is important to understand through a collective action lens or at a watershed scale. So if you're wanting to invest at a watershed scale, it's a localized project might not necessarily yield benefits at that greater scale, but to note that benefits do flow outside of the project boundaries across these greater municipal and watershed scales. But as they flow across, those benefits potentially decrease and can potentially become trade-offs as well. And water quality is a great example of that. So within the localized scale, your water quality benefit might be greatest through, let's say, a wetland restoration project, but as it flows across the landscape, various anthropogenic impacts might negatively affect that water quality that you're putting out at the localized scale. The certainty of benefit accrual, I've touched on this very lightly with the graphs. Our certainty factor is greatest at the project scale because we can measure it most effectively through a number of the indicators and calculation methods that we provide within the tool and the guide. Our certainty is greatest at the localized scale and then decreases as we increase spatial scale out. Data verification and validation. This is a tricky one. Again, certainty is only based on our best available science and what our experts know within contemporary science as well. So what we are trying to do is verify as many of these data points that we create as possible. But given 6,000 data points across one habitat type, and we're looking at 9 habitat types, so around 50,000 data points, it's not always possible to verify each one, but we are trying our best here. And then the last caveat that we just want to raise is that we haven't included compounded or cumulative benefits potential. So by example, if you invest in water quality, that has a direct benefit on some of the aquatic biodiversity that might relate that as well. So even though we look at biodiversity as a separate benefit in itself, there are cumulative impacts as well through landscape connectivity, water quality, air quality, food availability, etc., that might compound the benefits from biodiversity. So we haven't necessarily linked those just yet within this stage, but this is something that we're hoping to do down the line as we really unpack this work through further stages down the line. So I'm sure there are plenty of questions, but we'll hold those off to the end in the fireside chat. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Madhu Rajesh from Coca-Cola and Ivan Paspaldier from Denkstadt, who will take us through some of the valuation work that we've been working on to really understand how we can provide a social return on investment from these forecasts that we develop. So Ivan, Madhu, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Greg. I'll hand over to Madhu to kick off.
Hi, everyone. Does this work? Can you hear me? Right, okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Madhu from Coca-Cola, here to talk to you with my colleague Ivan from Denkstadt about some of the work we've been doing together on developing a methodology to quantify and better understand the co-benefits of nature-based solutions that you've been hearing about. So I'd like to just start by talking a little bit about our 2030 water security strategy that we launched last year with a focus on our operations, our communities, and our watersheds. We have a goal, which we've had since 2005, to replenish 100% of the water that we use in our finished beverages. And we have maintained this goal as part of our 2030 water security strategy and set ambitious targets for ourselves, for our operations, communities, and watersheds. We have, as the Coca-Cola company, together with our bottlers, so the whole Coca-Cola system, and in collaboration with the Coca-Cola Foundation, we have funded several hundred water projects globally. And many of these projects are nature-based solutions where we look at the restoration of many of the habitats that Greg mentioned earlier on in the presentation, wetlands, forests, grasslands, lagoons, lakes, etc. And many of these projects have very significant co-benefits other than simply water replenishment. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. I'd like to just summarize our journey with nature-based solutions and natural capital. So like I said, we set for the first time our targets on water replenishment in around 2007. We first achieved this goal of 100% replenishment in 2015. That was 5 years ahead of our original target. And then around 2016, we worked with Denkstadt to develop a methodology on quantifying some of the co-benefits of these nature-based solutions. And we published a white paper which summarized the findings of 8 of our projects in 2016. And around the same time, the Natural Capital Protocol was launched. So Coca-Cola contributed to the Natural Capital Protocol through sharing our learnings and findings. And then in 2020, we updated the methodology together with Denkstadt, and we piloted several projects from Europe using the updated methodology. At the same time, CEO Water Mandate launched its work on nature-based solutions that we were following very closely in active conversations with and sharing our key learnings with CEO Water Mandate and partners that were working on this. We then, in 2021, piloted another set of projects in Australia and South Pacific with the methodology to continue to test some of our learnings and findings. And then in 2022, we are now working with CEO Water Mandate and partners like Limnotech and the Nature Conservancy and Denkstadt to see how the methodology can be adapted to the nature-based NBS Explorer tool that CEO Water Mandate has developed and then be made available as an open source resource accessible to anyone who wants to invest in this. And by doing this, we really just want to strengthen the business case for investing in nature-based solutions because we feel, this area of work has very significant benefits to the environment and is something that we'd like to see more investment from many different partners in. If we move on to the next slide, please. Sivan, this is yours.
Yes, this is me. Okay, how did we actually develop this? So, valuing more than water. Traditionally, Coca-Cola have been investing in nature due to water targets, but doesn't take long to understand for these nature projects that there's all sorts of other benefits. I mean, you just need to go out and see it. It's evidently there, but it's difficult to measure. So our aim was to develop a methodology that is aimed at 2 particular type of non-experts. Number 1, these would be Coca-Cola's project partners. They're all international NGOs or local NGOs, excellent conservation professionals, but not necessarily natural capital professionals. On the other end, we have the people in Coca-Cola who hold the funding. They understand the value of money. They don't necessarily know or aware of the value of nature, at least not in a way that clicks for the typical sort of CEO or finance person. So a methodology that is useful, usable by non-specialists, which means it needs to be simple enough. You don't need a PhD in environmental economics to do the assessment. Also, it doesn't take you overly long because you have other things to do, such as actually restoring nature and running a project. Yeah. We based this on the Natural Capital Protocol as a framework and started out with setting a scope of 6 core ecosystem services, which we value in monetary terms. And this is the value of carbon sequestration, the use of water by people, water quality, flood protection, recreational benefits, and food and raw material benefits, which are typically benefits to do with farmers saving on water costs or actually increasing yields or making more money from crops. As well, qualitative estimation is important. Particularly biodiversity is a core ecosystem service where we by choice do not put an economic value, not because we haven't tried, we have. Everything points to biodiversity being very important, but we kind of knew that anyway. And the results are quite uncertain, so at this point at least, we focus on measuring other indicators such as species counts, ecosystems restored, habitat areas restored, just because it's more actionable at this stage. And as well, other qualitative benefits are also important. For each of these, there is a decision tree, or well, here rather a decision line, where we first guide you through a few questions to actually see, okay, does this benefit exist where you have your project? And then we make you measure what actually changed in the environment before you actually put a value on the project. And this is important natural capitals thinking, but it's also important from a practical sense for non-experts. Because if I'm a conservation professional and I restore a forest, intuitively I want to link the value to that forest, not with an average value somewhere from the literature, with my forest. So our method first has you assess what happened in the environment. Is it, how many cubic meters did you restore? How much carbon did you sequester? How many people visited your project, etc. And only then can you put a value on that project. Behind all this is a set of equations. And I do mean a set, so this is all Excel models. It's not something that is overly complicated. It's meant to be actionable. It's meant to be something that you can also peruse. You can understand where the calculations are coming from. And if you're a technical expert, you can fiddle around with it. You can make it better. You can make it as nice as you want. And we can go on the next slide. You'll see the sorts of analysis that we can do later. And this is assessing on the x-axis the contribution of Coca-Cola to a project. So Coca-Cola will usually fund a project through a Coca-Cola Foundation. It can be directly through a business unit. It can be through a bottler. And indeed, other organizations can also invest. So we attribute to Coca-Cola the part that is funded by Coca-Cola. On the y-axis, we have the value of ecosystem services. If a project were to persist in 10 years, what does this mean? Well, 10 years is a typical time frame that Coca-Cola used to assess for water targets. So now we're using it for ecosystem services. And this isn't just us multiplying a value by 10. Coca-Cola will periodically audit these projects. They will go on the ground. They'll see that they're still there so that you can actually count the benefits toward whatever it is you're counting. And this happens here as well. And you can see then some conclusions. So number one, the more money you put in, the more you invest, the bigger the benefit. You may think, okay, that's quite trivial, but not necessarily the case, especially if you haven't done the work correctly on the ground. Doesn't necessarily follow that the more money you throw at something, the better it is. Number two, we have found that certain projects perform way better than, relatively speaking, for the same unit of money invested. And this is because typically these are projects in environments that are quite severely degraded. So you can think of it this way. There's simply more for you to fix. With less money, you can achieve more in terms of benefits. Number four there on the slide is our projects that we've been assessing in the Asia-Pacific region. And there again, we find more benefit on average per unit of investment. And again, this is because these projects are typically aimed at communities that are not so well off. And they have some fundamental issues that need solving, such as access to water, improved livelihoods. Again, much more for you to fix with the same amount of money. So with a relatively small investment, you get a relatively big benefit. Number three, on the opposite side below this solid line, which is our payback line, if you will, the amount of money that it takes for a project to meet the original volume of funding. And this isn't money in Coca-Cola's pocket. This is money for the community. It's a social value. Some projects seem to not go over that line. This we find is not necessarily because the project isn't good. It's more we don't measure everything that we're supposed to measure. There's benefits such as capacity building, education, job creation, currently out of scope, but still important. So the narrative around these projects and the qualitative benefits that we estimate are also important. We definitely do not want this to be a reductionist exercise where you just look at some numbers and then, if it's over a threshold, yes, otherwise no. That's not the point. You need to understand the project in its entirety to make the business case. And number 5, this is applicable to any Coca-Cola project. That's the point. Indeed, we're sure it's applicable to any nature investment project. Next slide, please. Okay. Madhu, would you like to present the Guadalquivir project?
Yeah. Why not? Thanks. So this is a project that the Coca-Cola Foundation supported in southern Spain. It was a small ecosystem of about 3 hectares that we were looking at, a small wetland. But because of water scarcity issues in the area, it was under a lot of pressure. So the project was originally designed as a water replenishment project, but through the program we worked with local farmers to capacity build and train them on better farming practices, on improving water efficiency use in irrigation, as well as reducing the use of fertilizers. And that had a benefit because it obviously reduced the volume of water used for irrigation, but it also reduced the level of pollutants because of reduction in fertilizer use. And by increasing productivity of the farmers, it improved farmer income. The other area of work around this project was around the restoration of the habitat itself, which basically involved building some recreational infrastructure, installing bird hides, which essentially improved the area and increased the level of tourism, which generated economic benefits for the local community. The third benefit that we found was that by restoring the local wetland, we were able to increase the CO2 holding capacity of the wetland, and that had carbon sequestration benefits. So it's a great example that shows that even if a project is designed with replenishment as the primary objective, there are a number of secondary objectives that learning about them and quantifying them just helps with the overall project design. When you're thinking about the second phase of the project, or when you're thinking about new projects that one wants to support, there are many benefits to be taken into account so that we are supporting the right kind of projects. Ivan?
Next slide, please. Okay, going forward, we are opening this up together with the CO Water mandate. We want to make it so it's not just Coca-Cola that can assess these projects, it's anybody can assess these projects. You can go online on the nbsbenefitsexplorer.com and you can see for a project where we guide you through some questions in order to understand what your project design is, how do different benefits accrue to a total, what's the relative magnitude of those benefits on one end. And on the other end, we don't just want to open the central method that we use, we want to open the uncertainty analysis that goes into that behind the scenes so that we know that that works correctly and is in the correct ballpark. So we've tested, we've trialed this, we know that it gives reasonable results, but we want to also be able to give users the opportunity to understand the uncertainty, because it's not just uncertainty for uncertainty's sake. Actually, the value of nature really depends on value for whom. Different stakeholders have put a different value on nature. We want to be able to show this to users also as an educational element so that we can instill this thinking in project developers. And mind you, this is our early days. This is not exactly how it's going to look down the line. But as we are building this up and trialing it, we hope to get the feedback from people such as yourselves. And over time, we genuinely hope this is going to become a tool that is widely used. It's found useful by organizations, by non-specialists, so they can assess, they can learn, they can make the case, because, well, A, we need it, we need investment in nature, and B, at least based on our experience, it seems to be worth your while. This is what we find when we assess these things. So hopefully, yeah, sharing these learnings with everybody. I'll leave it with Madhu to wrap up.
Final slide, please. So the learnings that we have so far, some of them are publicly available on our website, and you'll find a link to our report here. So if you're interested in the topic, please do have a read, but more to follow in collaboration with CEO Water Mandate, Limnotech, the Nature Conservancy, and Denkstadt, and other partners going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Andrea to come up and I'll introduce the next session. We might stand. You all can see in the back. But if I get tired, I might sit. So we'll see how that goes. I'll introduce myself and then hand it over to Andrea, who's in the room, and then Ed and Nikki, who are joining us online. We'll check and see about how the technology is working. My name is Ben Walensky, Director of Partnerships and Innovation at the Arbor Day Foundation based out of Nebraska in the United States. And just wanted to say privileged to be here and grateful to Greg and others at the Pacific Institute for the opportunity to moderate this conversation. For clearly this is a comprehensive effort, if you couldn't tell by the work that we've reviewed so far, but also how many folks are speaking. It's very difficult to value nature, and it definitely took a village for this effort, and it's ongoing. I'm so excited to jump into the conversation. Andrea, if I could ask that you introduce yourself briefly. I know Wendy did it, but it's been some time.
It's been a while. Yeah. A lot of data between me and my introduction at the beginning. I'm Andrea Erickson-Quiros. I'm the global lead for water security at the Nature Conservancy. I'm also based in the United States in the state of Wyoming, and part of a team that does work with corporations, but also cities and communities in trying to help them on their journey for better water security. And our particular focus, obviously, is on nature. Thank you.
I'll hand it over to Ed. We'll see if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ed Pinero. I'm the president of Ecometrics LLC. And what we do is we have a methodology that does the identification, quantification, and valuation of benefits from nature-based solutions. So I'm US-based as well in Pennsylvania. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Ed. And then Nikki.
Hi, hello everybody. My name is Nikki Franciszkajki. I'm based in Utrecht, in the Netherlands. I'm a chair professor on urban and metropolitan governance and planning, and my focus on NBS is looking more on the governance with, of, and through nature-based solutions, especially in urban regions and urban landscapes.
Lovely, thank you. So just to kick off with maybe a softball question, there was a lot of information that we just received, and I might start with you, Andrea, just being in the room here. When thinking about what was discussed today, what are some of the things that you feel like are game-changing when it comes to building the business case for nature-based solutions? Because there's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot. And what's, to me, really, many times the barrier is people are skeptical about the case. And then we know it's there. If you work in this, you're excited about it. You value this work in watersheds. But it's hard to pull forward the data in a way that gives credibility. And so this begins to put in a way that we can all build upon that sort of organization, categorization of those activities, implementation on the ground to benefit, and starting to test the evidence. So now we can start working together. If we have a common framework, we can add to each other's efforts and really testing those valuations of the benefits that we're getting. And so that's starting to build the architecture that will help us be more credible in the future. So I think that's really important. There will be much more work that will be needed. They noted how much data had to be reviewed to get this far. Much more will be done. But we've now got something that we can all drive into. And I also really like very much to see how Coca-Cola is now using this kind of approach in a very clear way to make decisions. So going from, academic information to gathered information that has some, early conclusions to decision-making tools is what's really exciting about this for me.
Lovely. Maybe a good transition to Nikki as someone who works in the university setting. What is exciting about what we overviewed earlier today? What do you feel like are some of the game changers?
Well, I have to offer two kind of fire talk observations, and also coming from reviewing academic literature. The first is that we indeed see nature-based solutions mainstreaming, and not as part of solutions portfolio, but also as fully infrastructure solutions with a type of valuations, thinking, institutions that they require to take off. And seeing companies, but also actors across sectors, not only academics, but also consultancy, knowledge, other type of knowledge producers and knowledge holders, taking up the context, taking up the concept of nature-based solutions, creating the very much needed evidence base. For me, it is a sign of mainstreaming, and this is, of course, a very positive development. The second thing I want to say is academics, we are always very skeptical. I think we are paid to be skeptical and critical. And following from the climate change debate, we always have been, let's say, having second thoughts when companies come into the picture, thinking about, maladaptation risks, thinking about greenwashing. But what I have been seeing, especially with engaging with a number of companies, and also through the projects of Limnotech and the Pacific Institute, is a genuine interest and also understanding of the value of nature-based solutions. So I think this is also a sign of moving beyond greenwashing and looking really of NBS as a valid solution, as a valid alternative, but also as a business opportunity. And this is very important, not only because of restoring ecosystems at the landscape level, at an urban level, but also showing that there are different ways that this institutionalization and mainstreaming can happen. And as we always say, NBS are multi-actor, multi-sector, multidisciplinary endeavors and solutions. And I think the examples today show exactly this, that this is what they are, and they need multiple actors, collaboration, and cross-sectoral uptake for exactly creating the evidence base, show how it works, improve implementation, and looking back of what is needed from institutions for this to go smoother.
Thanks. I feel like we've heard from an NGO lead and an academic lead, and Ed, you've had the privilege of representing a number of both companies and NGOs and measuring, working to evaluate and put value on nature. I don't know if you want to finish us off with this question on what do you feel like is game changing, or what's been material to this conversation that you've heard in the work that we've done over the last several now years, some of us, to put this forward?
Yeah, sure. And I think the biggest thing is the ability to take this to the next level, is to move beyond qualitative talking about nature-based benefits to being able to quantify these in a more comprehensive way. I think what happens is, if you focus on nature-based solutions from the perspective of like doing the right thing, which is important, that's great, but you get locked into this corporate social responsibility kind of a silo, and that's the only investment that gets unlocked. But when you can speak about nature-based solutions and the value that they bring beyond or in addition to corporate social responsibility, and look at other things, organizational resilience, economic development, and other things that drive organizations, then you can unlock more and more investment. Because just to give you a perspective, this methodology that we use was originally created in another organization. It was a nonprofit that does ecosystem restoration, particularly in coastal environments. And the reason was specifically created to make the business case to get private sector investment in doing large scale restoration. So that was the driver, the ability to speak about nature-based solutions in a way that you could see that it's bringing many benefits to an organization in addition to the normal CSR perspective. So I think this ability to speak quantitatively, and when we speak of value, we're speaking not only of qualitative value, but actually quantified value, actually dollars. Being able to speak that, because then you can make return on investment discussions. Then you could speak intelligently about what you're going to get back for your investment, in directly and indirectly, but what that gets for you.
The breadth of knowledge in this group, but also the broader group, has been really interesting and inspiring to participate in. But I know that in what particular this initiative looked to and continues to look to accelerate is the identification, the accounting, the forecasting, the valuation of nature. And but we know that just having that quantitative measure, as you said, doesn't necessarily get the job done, right? Just having a number and saying, hey, company A, this is a great investment, do it. And so there's a requisite need for creativity, innovation around solutions for funding and financing of this work. And so I'd be interested in, and I can call on one of the three of you, or feel free to jump in. But just as we've been discussing forecasting and valuation to build the business case for NBS, what are that last mile almost of the innovative funding and financing solutions that you've seen be adopted, or that you're excited to maybe pilot moving forward to upscale and to mainstream nature-based solutions? Is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe Andrea will start. She's giving me a cue that she's ready to jump in.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in and join me on this. You know, I'm not sure that I have as clear a vision right now of what this will look like for the corporate sector. So that might be something to play with here a little bit. But what I want to note are some other examples from other kinds of financing flows. So public investment in nature-based solutions, I think we can feel confident that just on the back of corporate investment in projects, we're not going to get there. To get started, our corporate partners are really important. They're catalytic. And then we need to find a way to scale public investment. One of the things that we find has been a very good test of whether or not we've got a business case is to work with regulators. So if you're looking at water supply, it's generally a regulated industry. And for them to make any investment in nature-based solutions, the regulator has to look at that and say, yeah, that makes sense in terms of the product that you are required to provide to your stakeholders, your constituency that get water from you. So they're there to protect the value. And so they need to see a really strong business case. And so we found that actually taking, in very localized cases where we've run the numbers to make the business case to get a very clear valuation and ROI, and I think Yvonne was the one that said it's the economic value to someone in particular. It's not just, everybody in this case, and it's to the water utility company. And based on that economic case, if we can show there's a positive ROI from an investment in nature-based solutions as a complement to gray infrastructure, then you can get a regulator say, yep, that's a good idea. I will approve this. And on top of that, maybe we're going to do this for every city in my jurisdiction, that this is an approved thing. So now you have the ability of another major water user in the water company who has the ability to use their ratepayers' money to invest in nature-based solutions because it's a more cost-efficient way to deliver water security that's climate adapted and more likely to be a long-term value. So that's leveraging the corporate support that gets us going to get to that point of actually being able to say, what we could get done. And the other one that's interesting here to see how it might be growing in the marketplace is private investing. And it used to be just impact investing looked for these nice little niche opportunities. But I think it's a growing sector that will go beyond that. But even the private impact investors need to know, well, what am I going to get return on investment for my money? And so in some cases, we've been able to develop a really clear business case for some kinds of investments in nature-based solutions like aquifer recharge, one of the examples we've seen, in which companies can say, I'm going to go ahead and do some aquifer recharge projects here. I've figured out what the value is to agriculture, water users, local communities, et cetera. I know how to monetize that value, and I'm going to pay you back. And then they're going to the marketplace and they're raising money. We have one that's about $900 million in which we're a partner as a technical partner. As those are going to be growing areas where if we can make very strong business case, it's not going to cover all of the stuff we want to get done to have, truly healthy watersheds. There are going to be many projects that should be done because they're the right thing to do. But we can start taking off chunks and pieces the more strongly that we can take this example and the example that Coca-Cola is giving it and go out to the other revenue streams that are needed to get to the right scale. I'll stop there 'cause I'm sure you guys have some other examples to add to that.
Yeah, Nikki, do you want to jump in? Lot there to unpack, but I don't know if there's anything else to add. The initial question was innovative funding and financing solutions, particularly around upscaling and mainstreaming the work that's necessary, particularly around nature-based solutions.
Can I have an input on that? As a non-financing expert, but more looking at it from an institutional perspective, I think it is important now that we see with evidence, with cases, what works. It's also important to unpack and understand also the lessons learned from the process, because that will give the necessary feedback loop so as to adapt and adjust in a way institutional rules and processes to make this upscale possible. Because we start to have lots of evidence of what works in terms of societal support and acceptance, in terms of bringing different like social innovation, governance innovations together. But when it comes to financial instruments or financial mechanisms, I have to say that this becomes a little bit very conventional, the discussion. Innovative financial means, tools, mechanisms, instruments, when they are effective and successful in scaling up, we should not forget to unpack also the process, because that will make our institutions in terms of planning, in terms of regulatory instruments, more adaptive and attuned to such a scale up. So don't forget that there is a feedback loop that we also need to keep in mind. The one is the evidence base, extremely important, what works, but why it works, what make it work in this specific situation.
Ed, I don't know if there's anything else to add.
Yeah, just a kind of a spin on it. So if you think about this whole discussion, there's three things you need if you want to get increased investment, scale up investment in nature-based solutions. You need to be able to discuss that value, which is what we've been talking about. You need to be able to verbalize why that value is important to someone who, because you're trying to get investment. But the third thing that we need is the mechanism to do that. So if you tell me what the value is and and I understand why it's important to me, then what do I do? How do I get this? How do I invest in this? And you want to move away in order to get the scale up. You want to not move away from, but you want to add to the one-off kind of project where organization A puts money into project B, and there's a transaction there. You want to do this on a more almost market scale. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, and a lot of the work that we're doing is being used this way, interestingly enough, and that is the ability to look at the big picture of many benefits created at one time and look at that composite value created. So rather than looking at just carbon, just water, just this, just that, is what is the composite benefit created by a specific project or an activity? What are all the environmental, social, and economic benefits, and the value of all of those benefits composited? Because then you can start saying, if I invest in this project, the unit return on investment I'm getting is all of these different benefits, and this is a value for each of those. And one of the nice things about nature-based solutions is that I would argue that every nature-based solution has multiple benefits. It's very hard to find a nature-based solution that only has one benefit. So if you speak about only one benefit and you transact only one benefit, like a carbon credit or a water quality credit, then you're really missing an opportunity to really look at the big picture, and that would move more of these kind of larger scale investments.
Right, to put it all together. There are some fundamental things that you sort of need to see that there's value there. Like for example, if we're trying to do work in agriculture as our nature-based solution, it really does have to pencil out for the farmer. Like there's some basic valuation has to work, or there won't be the uptake. But no benefit other than that, maybe it's just sort of that social acceptability and economic viability is necessarily the trigger. It could be different in every single case. And I'm thinking of one city in Brazil and the regulator in which we did a business case like this where we came up with an ROI that actually wasn't positive for the utility. In fact, it was going to cost them more money to go ahead and do work in the upper watershed. But because there was all those other values, they were like, yeah, close enough. The important thing is now we know what this ratio is. We know that we're going to get some value towards reducing our costs in operations in return for doing the upstream work. But hey, this is rural development. There's biodiversity benefit out there. It's about who we want to be. It's part of our identity to be, in a community where we share a benefit. And so it makes sense for us to do this. So there's all those other things became really part of the decision. And it wasn't just a positive economic ROI. And so I do think that's an important point to, sure, go look for the numbers for the economic case, but the rest is valuable and will often move decision makers.
I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. I love the idea of moving from beyond transactional to transformational and the need to think about co-benefit, more holistic accounting of that. How much in that particular example or in other examples did you feel like you knew what was wanted by that audience, how to lay out the full value, and how much do you think that you would benefit from a tool like this or other tools that, as the Nature Conservancy, you might have at your discretion? Or is it the type of thing that giving them the panacea of co-benefits, you feel, and they can make up their own mind for themselves as business leaders or public utilities, things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question for all of us, but I'll start a little bit. A lot of times when you're working, so we're working through a construct we call water funds, which is a common, collective action structure to try to bring to the table the different stakeholders and see what challenges do we want to solve together and how might we do that using science and, how might we fund that. And in that process, we're going to find what people care about. They're going to say, I really care about the issues of this wetland that has been silted up because this is where I would fish and now I can't fish there anymore. So now we know what that interest is. So I really feel like we are, with this experiment and not experiment, with this project that's being developed, we're giving ourselves the tool set from which to grab the right tools. But we're going to definitely have to start with what's important locally. What's the problem people want to solve? And the more you're in that conversation, you'll find those other social benefits that will emerge. Traditional use of certain areas emerges that wouldn't have showed up in your sort of sector-based analysis, but it becomes important in the solutions. So all of this is a support to decision-making that leads to action, but really has to be locally framed on what's important.
Nikki, do you want to touch on that at all? I feel like that gets to your point of the importance of a feedback loop, particularly in the case development beyond just having data points.
Yes, and also the feedback is very important, not only in terms of the narrative and the understanding you need to start with, but also exactly because nature-based solutions provide multiple benefits. From an institutional perspective, they might touch different kinds of policy domains, policy areas. And then, yes, of course, it gets complex, it gets uncertain, but this feedback loop can also provide an avenue for more policy coordination. So, yeah, just to summarize what's been said, actually, this is like one aspect. The other aspect is also the aspect of time, of temporality, right? And nature-based solutions, when implemented and being on-site, real-life ones, they really provide multiple benefits, but different also ones across their development, across over time. That also means their value changes and increases. They're like upward value of what we see, exactly because there are different benefits and there are multiple benefits also across and over time. They don't devaluate. This is also important to understand in these financial tools and models. It is an important also argument in business cases. And again, a very important thing to take in consideration that different type of institutional configurations, institutional fronts you might face over time of having a nature-based solution. So this feedback loop needs to be continuous. It's going to be different exactly because the benefits derived, the multiple benefits, may vary also over time.
I might move us to the point on temporal and the importance of time. I might move us to our last question, but then also a question about time. There are ambitious goals that our planet has over the next, well now, but we have 2030 targets that many of us are looking towards. And so over the next 8, let's call it 10 years for the sake of a round number, how do you feel like this work might help drive the direction for nature-based solutions, particularly around accounting for them and valuing them? What are you excited about, and what do you feel like this opens the door for? Maybe Ed, we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I think I think that what I'm pretty excited about is the scaling that this particular work allows you to do, because particularly I'm talking about the framework and the work that the mandate has done to this point, because if you think about when we talk about nature-based solutions and value created, we're looking for return on investment. But you also have to think about that you have to think about return on investment to figure out what the value is. So you're always doing a balancing act between identifying, quantifying, and putting a value on benefits enough to give you the information you need to make the decisions you need to make, but without overkilling, because then you're spending way too much time and effort and resources just trying to figure out the math. So I think what this work has helped do is it gives a very visible roadmap to get very far down this discussion, very far down the process of understanding benefits, understanding the quantification of those benefits and the value quickly, so that you're not expending a lot of resources just to figure out where you are. From there, you can go further, because there's 2 cautions I would tell everybody about this work. One is that the different benefits manifest themselves differently to different stakeholders in different places at different times. So to try and get a single value assessment of a benefit everywhere for everything all the time is really not practical. But the ability to even understand this could be a benefit in different situations is already a step forward. Then you could drill down and try and figure out what the very specific level of valuation is, and what that is, how far you have to drill in is a function of what you need the information for. So I think that this general framework really helps put the context and move people in the right direction, so that they can pick and choose where they're going to put that extra level of effort towards. So
I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to shed light on as far as what you're excited about over the next 10 years in a tool like this.
I'm excited about so many things, and I'm also thinking about like the caveats, right? There's things that we should also keep in mind. I mean, I think Ed is quite right in that there's no one magic answer. There never will be. When people ask you, like, what's the value of wetland and, restoration, there is no answer. And that's hard because everybody wants to have an answer. But I think we are going to find that we need to further regionalize and contextualize this. And that's just about continuing on the journey of building the evidence base and finding ways to work together that capture what we've learned. And, I've seen a really cool tool that just looks at agriculture MBS in the upper Midwest. And there's literally thousands of papers published on those practices and their values just in that one geography, just in those practice sets. And so we have a long ways to go before we do that. In fact, maybe we never want to get to that level of detail, but there's that sense of like deepening our understanding to get clear on the evidence base. Okay, so let's get on the journey and keep filling in the spots on the page there. But Ed's also right in a really important way to stop and think, well, who do we want to make a decision at this point in time anyway? And what do they need? This is not an academic, evidence for academics. Most likely, if what we're trying to do is incentivize action based on our best available information, you want to stop and think, and what does the person who I'm trying to engage right now need? So we've tried to think about it as like, what's that early pre-feasibility that's just really accessible to a decision maker that isn't strong enough for making multi-million-dollar investments, but it is enough for that person to get interested. Like, oh, hey, I think I want to actually have a study on nature-based solutions in my community or for my corporation. And so we did something called the waterproof, which is, it's a, sort of more of a sit anywhere you are on the globe, enter a little bit of data, get a sense of the ROI, first looked, pre-feasibility. But maybe that's all you need for your particular point in the journey until we get a little bit further on. And then the thing that I'd be very excited about is if we could actually come back that feedback loop on evidence. So every business case is built on modeling. That's not a problem. That's what businesses do all the time. But we learn over time in businesses, hey, I had this idea. I thought this, thing I was selling was going to make $1 million. Turned out I made 12 cents. And so they have a feedback loop that says how well their business model worked. It's going to be great for us to continue to iterate on that evidence, to come back around and try to come up with, better qualified data as we go forward. So all those things are in front of us, but I think we want to go forward and not be caught up in where we don't know things, but to get excited about where we're starting to know things and continue to collaborate together on tools like this to get to faster decision making. I think that's what's exciting to me.
Lovely. I'm just reading some questions from the online group and seeing if we might have time. But Nikki, I might give you an opportunity to react to the positive, inspiring elements of this work and what excites you, despite the fact that maybe perfection is the enemy of progress here, and the elusive hunt for a silver bullet and putting our finger on value in anything, regardless of it being nature. So any reactions?
Well, what excites me for the future is the realization, and from academia, but also from practice and business, that we need to work together on this. And we have seen that great things can happen and change can happen when this collaboration is genuine, is continuous, and also looks on the critical challenges together. So for me, it's a very hopeful message that we are sitting in World Water Week in a session, and we are people from very different geographies, very different disciplines, very different sectors. And we are passionate about it, and we are all building the evidence base together. Let's keep doing that.
Thank you. Lots to take away, and I also think, before handing it back over to Michael to do the last opportunity for group feedback in the text chat thing, I think what we saw, bringing it back to the first SoundCloud, my big reaction to that was there was a lot of words, and I think nature-based solutions means a lot of things to a lot of people, and then trying to value those lots of things to lots of people is clearly a monumental task. But rather than maybe focusing on how to put our finger on one number, rather giving ourselves the approach, the pathways, and then clear context and direction from examples from leaders of what to do and what not to do, and the feedback loops required from local communities and the context in which these projects are operating, I think is what I took away from this conversation and this project. But thanks for I know in the essence of time, I'll pass it back over to Michael. I appreciate the openness to hearing this conversation today. Thanks.
All right, so I'm back with one final Mentimeter poll for you all. So we'll get that up. But go ahead in the meantime, get your phones out if you have them. They should still be available from the previous two if you left them open. If not, it's menti.com. And there's the code for you, also the QR code if you can scan it. And this is about thinking back on the first question we asked about the challenges. A lot showed up on valuation, forecasting, return on investment. So now we kind of want to hear from you and see what resonated most with you today. That will help you address those challenges that you previously mentioned at the beginning of the session. Again, another word cloud, so try and keep them simple if you can. We'll see what comes in. Start simple, business case, stacked benefits, quantification, get started, new tools. Progress over perfection, that's a good one. Prefeasibility, learn by doing, social return on investment, tools, co-benefits, need for marketplace, hope. There's a lot of good things there. I think we'll be able to capture these and share afterwards. So thank you for participating in that last poll. And then the last slide here we're going to show has the NBS Benefits Explorer tool that we mentioned that Greg kind of live demoed, so you can capture that. And then we also have the Benefit Accounting of NBS for Watersheds guide that we published last year that you can also capture. So we'll give you a minute to get those. And if you can't get them right now, they are available on CEO Water Mandate's website. So you can find them there as well. And for any questions, you have Greg's contact information there. So you can jot that down, take a picture, whichever you prefer. We'd love to hear any feedback you have, questions, comments, anything like that. And with that, I will hand it over to Matthias.
Yeah, thanks to these manifold insightful contributions on the unseen future value of nature-based solutions. The presented approach helps to build a business case through robust forecasting and valuation of the benefits which could accrue from NBS investments. The very NBS Benefits Explorer tool identifies 27 benefits across 4 intervention and 9 habitat types. The application ranging from water quality and quantity to carbon and biodiversity, as well as socio-economic aspects. This provides an impression of the potential and relevance of well-implemented NBS to resolve the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental pollution. The detailed forecasting with 6,000 data points per habitat type entails a scoring for both potential benefits and trade-offs based on extensive literature research and case studies. The exemplary scenario on the activity of groundwater recharge showcased how the implied benefit of groundwater storage accrues over time and scales. The caveats of forecasting include the magnitude, uncertainty, and spatial extents of benefits, as well as the cumulative potential and data validation. We saw in the context of water replenishment projects that it is essential to regard water for more than just its drinking value, but for all resulting ecosystem services. Generally, the higher the scope of the investment for water replenishment projects, the more beneficial the social return. Partnerships of cross-sectoral nature are key to upscaling and mainstreaming NBS, seen today through the multitude of speakers taking part in this work. The genuine interest and understanding of the evidence-based value of NBS provides the chance to move NBS to the next level. Working on both qualitative and quantitative levels means investing in NBS beyond CSR, but as full infrastructure solutions. Innovative funding and finance mechanisms need to be incentivized, but require an evidence-based feedback loop why and how NBS work to realize the benefits we discussed today. Building a strong business case offers the opportunity to scale up the composite values of NBS towards ecosystem resilience. We must follow a holistic approach to balance trade-offs between climate change objectives, biodiversity conservation, economic constraints, and social welfare. NBS must come with sound social and environmental safeguards. NBS are not, however, a universal key to all social and environmental challenges, but should be considered part of a toolbox to tackling our most pressing challenges. GIZ counts itself as a key partner and hopes to drive catalytic change through NBS. On behalf of the consortium of the NBS Benefits Explorer tool, I highly thank you for participating in today's session. Enjoy the coming sessions and days of World Water Week. Stay healthy and hydrated.